It's really a pleasure to be here. One of the first things I want to say is, I'd like to think that this empty seat up front is for my brother Victor Martinez, who is from the Mission District also, right? Martinez who prepared in the oven and who is originally from the San Joaquin Valley and was a mentor to many writers that come out of Fresno. And every time any writer from Fresno would come up here and read, he would be here with us, like hanging out and stuff. So we're good. Also, I want to say a special thank you to one of my teachers, Juana Alicia, who in 1999, she was in Fresno, and I was like broken, homeless. I was living on a friend's couch, and all smelling like 5 days unbathed, and she came into town, and I was like, oh, Juana Alicia's in town, man. Anyways, long story short, she did this lecture there, and said, I'm looking for someone to take up an apprenticeship out there in San Francisco to paint the fresco mural. And I was like, that's me! Oh, hang on. I think that's me. Anyway, so she took a chance on me, and I got to come out here and work with her in 1999. And that was really a moment, I think, that just changed the trajectory of my life. Even though I was on a scaffold at like 5 stories high, going, holy shit. And she just said, don't look down, just don't look down, Anyways, so it really did change my life. I think part of that trajectory, it's just, so thank you. That's it. I'm not going to read from Breathing in Dust, but I'm going to do something that I've never done before, and that is read from an unpublished novel. Because it's getting all kinds of rejections, and I'm just like, damn, it's not going to get out there. You're right? And so tonight, I decided it's a prose night tonight. We're going to switch it all up on you guys. So I'm going to read from an unpublished novel, and I'm going to read just a few pieces from it. So if you bear with me, I want to tell you this little story about how this little novel came to be. And so let me get a drink of water, and then we're going to do a time warp to 1947. Okay, we're going to do a time warp to 1947. So hold on a second.
Dude, I feel like I'm deep.
Selma, California, 1947.
Hint.
You have to picture this, okay? Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath came out in 1939. So this is less than 10 years later. We knew about the Oklahoma migration. We knew about all of the poor working conditions for the migrant workers in the San Joaquin Valley. We had just seen internment camps. The Japanese folks, our Asian American brothers and sisters, were being interned. They're in Pinedale Camp in Fresno, California. They're being interned in the Tule Lake Reservoir, which is in Tulare County, California. All of that is going on in the early 1940s. We're still experiencing, even though the Repatriation Act ended in the 30s, we're still seeing parts of that now, today. So in the 40s, it was still prevalent. And as all of that's going on in the San Joaquin Valley, we have this really petite Chicana farm worker, beautiful green eyes. She has green eyes, really petite. And she decides on this really cold October morning in 1947 to leave her husband once and for all. He was an abusive guy. And she says, I've got 2 babies. One of them is 5 years old. The other one is 1. I have to leave. I have to. So she calls up her sister Angie in Los Angeles. Says, Angie, I got to go there with you. I need to clear my head and get away from Alberto. Angie says, of course, Hermana, come on, get over here, I don't know how I'm going to do it, she says. It's early in the morning, just get up early in the morning and leave. But what am I going to do with little Albert? He's here. Says, the dad's going to take care of him. He's okay. The dad's, it's not the baby boy that he's hurting, it's you. Just come over here for now, let's clear your head. She says, fuck it, okay. 1947, she jumps on a Greyhound bus that morning in Selma. She starts beelining it towards Los Angeles. She gets to Bakersfield. And in Bakersfield, California, at the Greyhound station, this white man gets on boards the bus. And they kind of meet eyes for a second, and she just ignores him. She just kind of leans her head up against the window and stays there. And the bus continues on, and that man has a seat behind her, and he starts to talk to her. He's like, he starts to have a little conversation with her. And she's intrigued by him. And he tells her, he talks in ways that she never heard before. She says, you must be a college boy, He says, yeah, I went to college, I went to college up on the East Coast. That's where I'm from. She says, okay, that's cool. Well, why don't you sit over here? So they sit down, start chatting. Okay, they start hanging out and talking. They spend the next 15 days together. But the next 7 days, for the rest of that week, they stay in Los Angeles. And she never makes it to her sister Angie's house. She calls Angie, she goes and sees Angie. But this white boy, this college boy, tells her, I'm an aspiring writer. One day I'm going to be a writer. She says, that's good, that's fantastic. I've never met a writer. So it's fantastic. So they spend that time in LA, and he says to her at one point, listen, I know your situation now. And, I think we have a connection. Why don't you come with me to New York? She says, that sounds great. But can we go back first and get my babies in the San Joaquin Valley? And he goes, yeah, the San Joaquin Valley, In fact, why don't we do this? Why don't we go back, get your babies in the San Joaquin Valley? I read Steinbeck, I read William Soroyan. I know all about that Heart Valley work. Why don't we go back to the San Joaquin Valley? You and I will pick in your family, what they pick, labor camps, cotton fields. Why don't we pick a little bit of cotton, like I read in Steinbeck, like I read in William Soroyan. Why don't we just pick a little bit of cotton, just for a few weeks, we'll make some money, and then we'll take the kids and we'll be off to New York City. She looks at him like, what do you know about cotton picking? He goes, I read Steinbeck. She says, hell with it, All right, let's go. They return to the San Joaquin Valley, 1947. Okay, this is October, early October. They get back to the valley. He starts working side by side. She has a baby with him. Her little son, Alberto, was only 5 years old, and the little boy's picking faster than the white dude. He's trying to pick. These people, they're fast, they're fast pickers. Finally, a week is up. It's the end of the 15th day together. And he looks at her in the field in Selma and says to her, it's not working out. I really like you a lot. I feel something here. I really do, genuinely. But I gotta go to New York. Okay? When you get to New York. And then he says, the writer says, or the white boy says, for then we parted ways in the Selma grape field, took 12 steps with our backs to each other, we turned around, for love is a duel. And I was always like, God damn, I wish I wrote that line. But he wrote that line. 1947, 1951 comes around, right? So they wrote a few love letters in the meantime. She was like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to go. I'm going to get there. We're still going to go to New York. We're still going to meet you. And he's like, yeah. He writes back to her. They send pictures a few times. And that happens for, until the month of December, a couple of months, right? And then the love dissolves. Okay? Anyway, 1951, he finishes writing his magnum opus. He finishes writing his book, the one that's going to define him and his entire generation. He writes that book in 51. 52, it gets rejected. 53, it gets rejected. Sounds like mine. 54, it gets rejected. 55, it gets rejected. 56, it gets rejected. Finally, a friend, an agent, and publisher in New York City, says to him, listen, man, I've done everything I could to go to bat for you. So now it's 1956, and the guy says to him, listen, here's the only chance that your book has. Do you have anything, like a small excerpt that we could get published in this big journal? And if that excerpt gets published, then I think that'll open the doors for you. Right? Agents and publishers are still saying that to writers today. Sometimes it works. And the guy says, the writer goes, you know what? There is this one sort of tender little excerpt that I have. It's called The Mexican Girl. So here you go. And so said publisher sends it off to the Paris Review in 1956, late 1956. Paris Review takes it, The Mexican Girl, by Jack Kerouac. A few months later, 1957, On the Road gets published. You guys ever hear that story? Yeah, of course not. How did I come about this story?
Yes.
It was a question about lineage that sparked it all. I can't recall the exact date, but I do know that it was February of 2007, and I was standing in the snow on a curb in Boulder, Colorado. I was waiting for my wife to pick me up. Little did I know that in that moment I would find myself at an intersection that included my educational journey rooted in the dim towns of Central California and a long road paved by one of America's revered rebel writers, Jack Kerouac. I was attending Naropa University, a school known for two things perhaps: that it's the first formal Buddhist school in the West, and that it houses a reputable writing program named after the author, Jack Kerouac's school. It was the 50th anniversary of his publication of his novel On the Road, a book considered by many to be among the blah, 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 because you all know about that. A few minutes earlier, before finding myself standing in the snow, I had just walked out of this classroom where the topic was lineage. I left with the skepticism, wondering exactly what I was doing in this school, a place built upon the reputation of those outcasts Kerouac himself called the Beats. Here I was now, 33 years old, an undergraduate still, trying to carve out for myself a life in writing. And then at that moment, standing there on that curb, I did something I'd done at least a dozen times since attending the school. I cracked open On the Road and I began skimming through its pages. But this time, without really knowing why, I was looking to find something of myself within these pages. The first time I had read this book, I was probably 16. The second time, I was in my early 20s. The third time was now. I flipped straight to the chapter about a farm worker woman named Terry, who Kerouac referred to as the Mexican girl. She was from the San Joaquin Valley, the town of Selma, a speck about 12 miles south of Fresno, Selma, raising capital of the world. I laughed thinking about that billboard sign on Highway 99.
Yeah.
I read on now with a renewed and deeper sense of interest. His descriptions of California's agricultural region, the Central Valley, though fairly accurate, took me there, to that place I knew so well. Reading his depiction of Terry reminded me of my own grandmother, a woman who, much like Terry, lived a good part of her life among the labor camps of the valley, or as they're known locally, Los Campos. The cold air fell away and the warmth settled on the back of my hands and against my neck. And for a brief moment, I'd forgotten I was standing outside in Colorado's coldest month. When I was done reading that chapter, I closed the book and I stared up the road. My wife was pulling her car around the corner, flashing headlights at me. I waved at her and I put the book in my backpack. And I thought of Terry, the real Terry, that is B. Franco, the Mexican girl. I wondered who she was right then. I wondered whatever became of her. This was the beginning, or at least my beginning. Her beginning was elsewhere, a separate reality, a different time and place altogether. So I decided right then and there at that point that I was going to fictionalize this account of her. I was going to make up this, spin this story about this Mexican girl from her perspective, from her point of view. Based on the women that I knew from the San Joaquin Valley. So naturally I started to do the research and read all the biographies that mentioned her and all the things that talked about her. And one biographer had more information than all the rest about this woman. So I emailed him and I was like, hey man, where'd you get that information from? And he's like, hey man, they got her letters in the New York Public Library. Standing at the steps, facing the giant marble lion in the face, So I go into the archive room, green felts, everything's sterile. Smells like, ancient. We got the little gloves on. Put my gloves on too. They look at me and they go, the woman comes in, she looks at me. I mean, I don't look like anybody else in the archive room. She goes, you here for the B. Franco letters? I'm here for the B. Franco letters. All right, I come back with a box. You come back with the box, start opening the letters up. There's 5 letters, a little postcard. And they're all addressed from this place in Selma. And I was like, holy shit, I know all these streets. Holy shit, I know all these landmarks. Things start coming together. I'm like, beautiful mind. I'm like, man, that's pie, I know it. So I look at the archivist and I go, listen, how do I get permission to publish these letters? He goes, oh yeah, it's entirely possible, Mr. Hernandez. You can get permission to publish these letters. However, the only thing that you have to do is you have to prove that you have searched diligently for her. If you have searched diligently for her estate and her family, and you can prove that, then we can relinquish the rights to publish her letters.
Wow.
I pull up a private investigator. I was like, shit, man, she's from Fresno. This wonderful Armenian lady, chingona. And she has an English major. She's an English major. She's a private investigator, man. I was like, she would know. So I call her up, 007? Yeah. This is a true story, right? She's like, 007? She goes, yeah. I go, all right, here's my story. Blah, 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 blah. She's like, yep, count me in. $100. $100, that's all you need. All right. She didn't find shit. All right? She didn't find anything. However, she did give me an official receipt that said I worked for Mr. Hernandez for this amount of time and everything. I emailed it off to New York City. New York City got it. He goes, yep, this will do it. Sent me a package back, her letters.
Wow.
And I was like, shit. Now what? So I spent the next year and a half looking for her, and I just got into this spiral, warped world of journalistic stuff that I was like in over my head, naive. I was like at the Fresno County Hall of Records saying, oh, I'm her great-great-grandson, man. I'm looking for a birth certificate, death certificate. And they were like, all right, come back here, Mr. Hernandez. We looked for stuff, and thank God we didn't find anything because otherwise I'd have to prove that I was. And I was like, I'm sure I've done some papers up too for that. Anyways, I was looking everywhere. I couldn't find her. Finally, I was like, I'm done. I'm done, man. I'm just going to write this book. Fiction, just from what I know. I got her letters. I've seen his journals, and I know all the background story. I'm going to fictionalize it from what I know, and it's still going to be more honest and probably more to the point about this woman than what he wrote. So, I call my mom up, and I'm like, Mom, she's invested by now. Mijo, have you found her? Have you found her? You better find her, fella. You better find her. I was like, no, Mom, listen, I'm done. I'm a writer. I'm just going to make it up. I'm going to make it up. You know, if I'm not worth my imagination, forget it. Just give me your papers. I'll look for her. My mom's retired. She's retired. Wow. Retired. 24 hours. I got someone for you. Before I continue the story, I'm going to read you letter 1. November 2nd, 1947. Dearest Jackie, I hope you received my letter by now and postcard. Jackie, don't write to my sister's address. Address your letters here to the post office in Selma, California. I'm going to stay here in Selma until it's time to go to New York to see you. I sure miss you. So does little Al. I have little Patsy here with me now. Boy, how she's grown. I wish you could see her, Jackie. She sure would love you, and the first thing she would ask you for would be a kiss. She's so sweet, even if she is my girl. I say that myself. You'd think so too if only you were here, Jackie. I'll send you a picture of her as soon as I can. It's been cold and raining here. How is it over there, honey? Do you miss me still? I'm always thinking of you and the lovely times we two had together. Jackie, I came back to Selma that night on Halloween, so you can see I didn't celebrate at all. We were riding on that Greyhound bus that night, and it really didn't matter. Jackie, please send me a picture of yourself so that I can look at you every day. I love you very much. Even if we are far from each other, I'll never forget you. Say hello to your mom. Answer soon. Love and kisses to you, Jackie boy. Yours always, B. Franco. So now, I can get carried away with time. So somebody just like, sounds like, you like shake your rattle at me.
And you know what? You already been past your time, but like, I'm so
Holy
into
shit.
it.
Alright, I'm going to just give you this little bit. I'm going to read you like a piece from the book, and that's it, because I don't want to pass my time. So.
We're like this way.
Well, at the very end, I'm going to say, read the book. We're going to go, damn it, and then we're going to pass around the petition. Everybody's going to sign it. We're going to send it off to publishers. Okay? So here I go. I have this. So my mom gives me this information, and lo and behold, the address is 1 mile from my house in Fresno.
Wow.
I go to her. I go to the doorstep, and I'm like, it's like Fresno's east side, man. Joseph knows. We don't go to that side of town. So I go there anyways. Knock on the door. The door opens. I'm on the front porch. The door opens. And they leave this metal screen door that you can't see through. It's just a voice. I have a friend, Mark Arax, who's a journalist and a writer. He used to be a journalist for the LA Times. Fearless dude. I was like, if anybody knows how to approach a situation, Mark Arax. So I call him up, hey Mark, man, I got this situation, how do I? He's like, look man, just go up to the door and you just be honest. You give her your authentic eye. Tim, you know you're an authentic guy. You got authentic eyes. You go up to that door, you give them those authentic eyes and you say, listen, this story's going to sound crazy, but... So I'm on the door and I hear the voice and I give him the authentic eyes. And I go, this story's going to sound crazy, but... and I told the story. It's a woman's voice, too young to be Franco, but it's a woman's voice, and she says, you got the wrong family. All right, can I show you these letters, though? She's like, sure. I pass her the letters, she passes them back to the director 5 minutes, and she goes, come back Tuesday and talk to my brother, Albert. All right. So, I'm going to condense my version now and say to you that when my book is published, I'll come back and we'll do a big version. However, at that point, I left off the porch because she shooed me away and said, come back Tuesday. I left off the porch. But I stopped because I almost forgot something. One more question. I stopped in midair. Matrix. I looked back at her and I said, can I ask you one more thing before I leave? She goes, sure, can you ask through the door? I said, absolutely. Is your mother still alive? She goes, yeah, but she's inside sleeping right now. So, for the last 2 years, I've been interviewing her. She's alive, and I've been interviewing her. We're giving all of her story. I'm going to read you an excerpt, and then I'm going to end with that, okay? 47. The workers couldn't stop talking about it, especially that whole first day after it happened. A Mexican was found strung up in a sycamore near Raisin City. From his left foot dangled a cardboard sign, parasite. The Fresno County coroner confirmed because nowhere on the body were there bruises or scrapes. The only logical explanation was suicide, a common occurrence among braceros. Naturally, they missed their families back home. Depression was inevitable, fear constant, the food too bland. A bottle of whiskey was found half empty. And for Sixto Maria Martinez, all the signs were there. On this very day, his contract was up. The workers knew this, and they thought hard about it as they bent over their vines that morning in the solemn days. The fields were gray with dew, and each grape had a thin veil of film so that its sheen was hidden. So quiet were the rows and shuffling their feet that swallowtails had perched themselves on the branches of the vines and plucked the smaller tart grapes at will. And as if things weren't bad enough, a cold snap was creeping in over Devil's Ridge from the north and settling down into the valley, sure to cripple whatever bits of fruit were still unharvested. That morning, that particular morning, Bee's hands moved faster than anybody else's. Box after box was filled, carted off to be weighed and counted, and within seconds she was right back to where she left off, on the very same tendril, making sure the job was done and done right, and that every last grape was accounted for. She passed other workers as if they were standing still, because mostly they were, scratching their heads, wondering when and how the raves would go down. And they wondered whether or not the white guy had anything to do with it. And they eyed Jack, and for the most part he got good at ignoring this, but off and on, once in a while, he would feel something, a pebble, smash against the back of his neck. And even then he'd shrug it off, and he'd keep his hands moving. Meanwhile, Bee kept saying words to herself like New York. She would say this in her mind, New York, while her feet were sunk firm in the wet soil, and the rest of her may as well have been in the subway, barreling down the spine of Manhattan, a purse slung over her shoulder and both kids clinging to each arm. She thought about what her brother had said. Her brother Alex, 7 days, Bee. That's all. He said just 7 more days. So she said that to herself, 7 more little days. She passed the time picturing their new life, imagining that big smell of New York City, watching the kids monkey around the playground. She lifted another box of grapes and hauled them off to be counted. Meanwhile, Jack trailed one row back, cutting away viciously from his curved knife, all the knots and tendrils that cradled the grapes deep in their clutches. His gaze was stern and removed, and his pink face glowed in the cold. Little Albert nipped at his heels, raking out whatever clusters went overlooked, and he would put those grapes in Jack's box like the handy little assistant that he was. And each time he did this, he looked up to Jack for approval, a smile, anything to erase that worrisome look on his face. Jack discreetly watched the way that little boy handled his knife, and how he shot around the whole field like a tireless sprite, offering a hand here and there, and how the little boy would call out to the other workers in Spanish, whistling the whole way. He was a little man doing big man's work, and Jack had taken notice that the field had an army of these little men workers, boys, whose small hands were crucial to the whole operation. Every last one of them wore a defeated mask, and if you looked at those boys from a distance, he reasoned, you would think they were full-grown men by the way they stood, hips square, shoulders back. The only way you could tell the boys apart from the adults was at lunchtime when they'd gather around a hole to shoot marbles. Jack observed this, and he shook his head, and he recalled a line from one of the great scribes of this same territory, William Soroyan, who said it best about such children of the valley. I was a little afraid of him, not the boy himself, but what he seemed to be, the victim of the world. Thank you.